There's no argument in sports that gets people more heated than this one. Michael Jordan or LeBron James? Ask 10 people and you'll get 10 different answers. And most of them are just repeating whatever basketball era they grew up watching. Older fans point to championships and a perfect 6-0 finals record. Younger fans will point to 20 plus years of sustained excellence and a stat sheet that keeps growing every single season. Neither side is really wrong though. They're just measuring different things, which is exactly why this argument never gets resolved. So instead of throwing career totals and ring counts at each other and letting the same tide debate spin in circles, we're gonna do something different today. We're isolating 3 specific windows in each of their careers: the athletic prime, the peak of pure on-court skill, and the late career adaptation once that athleticism was gone. For each case, we're picking the exact season, or in one case, a 2-season stretch that best represents it, and we're explaining why that particular year and not another one. Then we're putting the two side by side, round by round, and reaching an actual verdict instead of just restarting both sides. Let's get right into it. Jordan in 1988 to 1989. We're picking this specific year over any other early Jordan season because of exactly what the roster looked like. Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant were on the team, but neither one was who they'd eventually become. Pippen was still more of a transition athlete than a half-court playmaker, and Grant's offensive game didn't extend much more past a reliable 15-foot jumper. Veterans like Bill Cartwright and John Paxson helped, but this wasn't a team that could generate offense without Jordan doing it himself. So he adjusted his game to compensate, and the results showed it. He averaged 32.5 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists across 81 games. A career-high assist number that came from necessity, not preference. This is peak hang time Jordan. The version of him that could stay in the air until a defender started coming back down, getting to the rim or pulling up mid-range basically whenever he wanted, and there wasn't a rim protector in the league who could stop it without fouling him. The postseason that year produced the single most iconic image of this entire phase of his career. In the first round against Cleveland, he hit the buzzer-beater jumper over Craig Ehlo that's still replayed every single spring. From there, Chicago pushed all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in franchise history with Jordan on the roster, before running into a Detroit team whose defensive scheme later was nicknamed, or as you guys all know, Jordan Rules. It was built around physically wearing him down. Even against that though, Jordan came within a game of pulling off the upset and nearly captured a second consecutive MVP award. LeBron in 2009 to 2010. The comparable pick here isn't LeBron's first MVP season in 08-09, it's the follow-up year, because in 2009 to 10, the Cleveland Cavaliers roster thinned out the furthest and LeBron's game had to expand the most to cover for it. He averaged 29 points, 8 assists, and 7 rebounds, a career-high assist number driven by the exact same logic as Jordan's 1989 spike. There simply wasn't anyone on the roster capable of creating offense. Mo Williams could get hot from the perimeter and Anderson Varejao brought defensive energy, but this was fundamentally a one-star operation, and LeBron's numbers reflected a player doing everything at once: scoring, playmaking, defending the perimeter, even protecting the rim in stretches. He won MVP by a landslide, taking 116 of a possible 123 first place votes over Kevin Durant, and Cleveland finished the season at 61-21, the best record in the league and genuinely an absurd accomplishment for a team with only a single All-Star. But the postseason told a different story. Cleveland ran into Boston's aging but still dangerous Big Three core in the second round and lost. The same result as the year before. And that repeat second round exit is still the first thing people bring up whenever this particular season gets mentioned. Even though the individual regular season workload LeBron carried that year remains one of the most impressive stat line of the pre-Miami era. Both of these are effectively the same type of season. A superstar doing more than usual because his roster's limitations demanded it. And that stat line backs that up almost identically down to the assist spike. Where they diverge is what happened in the postseason. Jordan produced the signature shot of his early career and a deep playoff run relative to expectations. LeBron produced a more dominant regular season MVP vote, but repeated the same second round results as the year before. We're giving this round to Jordan, but narrowly because it's a good conversation. Iconic postseason moments tend to carry more weight than a landslide regular season vote. It was Jordan's first full year back after retiring to play minor league baseball, and by his own later admission, that year was more mentally and physically draining than most people realized at the time, partly because he'd lost a step athletically, and partly because he had something to prove after Chicago's shocking second-round exit to Orlando the year before. In the series where fans and media openly questioned whether he'd lost his edge, he'd physically changed by this point too. Not the same aerial threat from 1989, and in response his game shifted towards footwork, post moves, a fadeaway, and a deep bag of counters that relied on craft instead of pure explosiveness. The results were still absurd. He averaged 30 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists a game, and led a Bulls team that finished 7-2-10, still the best regular season record in league history at the time it happened. Playoffs were barely a contest that year. Chicago lost just a single game across the entire postseason on the way to the championship, a level of dominance that essentially hasn't been replicated since. This is the pick over almost any other LeBron season, specifically because of the gap between the quality of his roster and what he still produced. At 33, the vertical explosiveness that defined his Cleveland and Miami years wasn't fully there anymore, but the skill set underneath it had become more complete than it had ever been. He developed into a legitimate three-point shooter, comfortable posting up smaller defenders on switches, comfortable initiating offense from the elbow or the top of the key instead of just attacking downhill. And he did all of that while carrying a Cleveland roster that had been scrambled by the Kyrie Irving trade the year before, and never really came back together as a cohesive unit. The postseason ended with a 50-point triple-double in Game 1 against a Golden State team that many considered the greatest ever assembled. Cleveland still lost the series in a sweep, but the sheer degree of difficulty in getting there on that roster against that opponent is almost unmatched anywhere else. Jordan's team was simply better in 1995-1996, and that's not a criticism on LeBron. It's just an honest accounting of two very different rosters separated by more than 20 years. But LeBron's individual burden that postseason, doing what he did with almost no help against a historically great opponent, was heavier by a wide margin. This round is close enough that we're calling it a near draw, but is tilting only very slightly towards LeBron on pure degree of difficulty, while fully acknowledging that Jordan's team accomplishment, 72 wins, and a title with minimal resistance is objectively the larger accomplishment on paper. So for Jordan and the Wizards, we're gonna combine the 2001 and 2 season and the 2002 to 2003 season as well. We're treating both years as a single window here because together they'll tell a more complete story than either season does on its own. After more than 3 years away from competitive basketball entirely, Jordan came back at 38 years old and still averaged 22 points, 5 rebounds and 5 assists in his first Wizards season, even dropping 51 points on the Hornets that December. A performance that still gets replayed as proof he hadn't fully lost it. A knee injury derailed the back half of the season, but he came back for a second Wizards year at 39 and 40, still averaging 20 points a game and leading the entire team in steals. Neither Wizards roster made the playoffs, and that matters. The roster around him genuinely wasn't built to compete regardless of what Jordan gave them, but the fact that he was still producing at an all-star level that far removed from his prime. The 2020 season alone is a strong data point on its own. At 36 years old, coming off the shortest off-season in league history, immediately after winning a championship the year prior, he still averaged 25 points, 7 rebounds and 7 assists, and was the outright frontrunner for MVP. But the more relevant data point for this round of the debate is what happened in the years since. He's continued producing at a level that shouldn't be possible for a player his age, reportedly passing Jordan's own career mark for 30-point games somewhere along the way, well into a season played after his 40th birthday. There's functionally no precedent anywhere in league history for a player sustaining this level of individual production this many years removed from his athletic peak. This isn't a short comeback burst after time away like Jordan's Wizards run. Essentially uninterrupted elite level basketball stretched across nearly a decade longer than most careers led in total. Jordan's Wizard stretch is impressively largely because of the 3-year layoff, coming back cold and still performing at an all-star level. LeBron's version of this phase is a fundamentally different kind of impressive. Not a comeback story, but an uninterrupted continuation of elite production that's now stretched years past the point where most all-time greats have fallen off a cliff. And this is a genuinely tight margin, tighter than either side of this debate usually wants to admit, honestly. And where you land ultimately comes down to how much personal weight you put on peak iconic moments versus 2 full decades of sustained brilliance. That tension is really the entire reason this argument has survived as long as it has, because the answer changes completely depending on which specific years of a career you value most. Let us know in the comments which round you think we got wrong and which one you think we were too generous with. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.